Agree with that? Yes. But we have hope. We have love. We have hope because we wouldn't be here if we didn't have hope. And so I wanted to create a space where even I can talk, but also make it an interactive conversation with you all. Is that all right? Yeah. Back to, it's 50 years since Dr. King and Bobby Kennedy were killed. Why do I bring this up? You know, when you look at Dr. King, when he gave his Vietnam War speech a year before he was killed, he didn't say poor blacks and poor white. He didn't say, he talked about economic injustice, but he applied it to different types of people. We're saying poor whites and poor blacks to fight poor yellow people, Asian sisters and brothers, in a place called Vietnam. And then he created the Poor People's Campaign. And he was talking about all people because he understood that whole intersectionality piece because economic injustice affects us all. Then you think about Bobby Kennedy, you know, this is someone who came from privilege, who came from wealth. There's nothing wrong with coming from privilege and wealth as long as you use that in service to humanity. Bobby had a traumatic experience in his life. His brother was killed on national TV, President of the United States. He became a different person. He began to listen to the voices of people that were different than him. And those same white sisters and brothers that Trump has appealed to, and Reagan has appealed to, and Bush has appealed to, were actually Bobby Kennedy supporters in places like Indiana, where he spoke when Dr. King was killed in April of '68. The problem, I would submit, is that those folks were scooped up by the men that Eve is talking about, and white nationalism was planted in their heads. It's called Fox News Channel. It's called the Christian Coalition. You know, it's called Us Against Them. It's called Make America Great Again. And as a result of that, this is why you see folks who are racist, who are sexist, who are homophobic, who are anti-immigrant, even if they can't even articulate anything logically. A week before the election in 2016, I was in Washington State. I was in an Uber ride with a white brother, a working class white brother. He didn't know me from a can of paint. I asked him a simple question. I said, what do you think about the election that's about to happen? He puffed his chest out and he said, Hillary Clinton, hell with her. She's going to turn the country into Muslim communists. I said, why do you say that? He said, because she's a Muslim communist. Exactly. Thank you for saying that. But there's no logic because they've been spoon-fed. What we need to understand as progressive people is they've been spoon-fed for practically 40 years now. You know, let's be honest about this. You know,
and I could literally go around the whole audience and point everybody out who I'm happy to see here tonight. But one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is like, how do we fight off, right, what's coming at the same time as we're creating the world we want, right? Yeah. And part of me, you know, I think sometimes it's about dancing. And I know that may sound crazy, but one of the things I learned from 1 Billion Rising, which is a global movement to end violence against women that's in its 7th year, is that when people dance, another energy begins to happen, something's catalyzed in them, magic begins to happen, they begin to feel themselves on the ground, on the mother, they begin to feel community, they begin to release their trauma, they begin to feel connected to everyone and anyone around them. And to me, it's almost like a metaphor of what we have to start doing. Like, in a way, we have to get out of the binaries, out of the left and rights, out of the wrong and rights, but where do we connect? What is the basis on which we connect? What is the basis on which we can dance together? When I'm dancing in the streets on 1 Billion Rising in Hong Kong, right, with 15,000 domestic workers who are dancing literally for their lives for 5 hours in the hot sun and dancing like I've never seen in the world, I don't say to myself, is she a Democrat or a Republican?
That's right.
I'm saying we are here dancing for our lives. We are dancing for the return of the mother. We are dancing for the return of the spirit. And I think it's like, how do we hold both those things so that we are naming things? We are saying, like, where we're moving towards is no doubt fascism if we don't turn it around. We can't even pretend that's not true.
That's right.
But at the same time, as we say that, what are we as leftists, as progressives, as activists offering up? And I think, to be honest, one of the failures of the Democratic Party, except for a lot of new progressives who are coming up, like Stacey and Dellums and you know, Pramila Jayawal and some really great people who are up. We're not offering a vision. We're not saying this is, you know, Trump goes out and he lies and lies and lies and lies to all these poor working people who he's completely destroying with every tax cut he makes, with every business he closes, but he's offering them something, even if it's a big fat lie. He's offering them a vision. We have to start painting a picture of a dream, of what we believe is possible here.
I totally agree. Human being. And what I'm looking for now is the humanity in people, you know, and I refuse to be put in these stupid boxes just to make someone feel good on TV, you know. It's like, our lives are at stake, what Eve is talking about. And I think the word that comes to mind is like, you know, where's the love at? Where is the love at, you know, for ourselves and for each other? I grapple with it, we all got to grapple with this, you know. Do we actually love ourselves and love each other? I would offer, sadly, in this country, and we both have been outside the country, that this is a very traumatized country. This is a very damaged country. It's impossible not to be, but this country was founded, quote unquote, on genocide of indigenous people, African people. My ancestors were enslaved and built the economic infrastructure of this country. The constant oppression of women from the very beginning, you know, the ostracization and oppression of LGBTQI people, you know, disabled people. You know, the list of folks who have been on the margins. And I would even say to my white sisters and brothers who are out there, you know, when I hear people saying that they're so anti-immigrant, I'm like, you're forgetting that your ancestors were immigrants. You know, there was a time when if you were Jewish, if you were Italian, if you were Irish, you weren't wanted there either. And, you know, people should watch movies like Scorsese's Gangs of New York, where he makes it very clear in the film, here's the native whites and here's how they treated the foreign whites. And so this is a repeat of stuff. And I also would add, Eve, I think that we need to know history. You know, we can't just have folks making up history. And, you know, I don't know how to say that. I'm so glad that both our books are here because we're both readers. And it doesn't mean that we think we're better than anybody else, but it's like, you know, reading is incredibly important. Like, I don't know how you can be a playwright or an actor or a dancer or a scholar or an activist or just a citizen in this country and not read books on a consistent basis, a range of books, and have a working knowledge of New York City, of America, of the place we live in. It's like, you know, I represent Brooklyn. I've been in Brooklyn a long time, also from New Jersey originally, but people in Brooklyn always shouting out, where Brooklyn at? That's what we like to say. And then if you ask people questions, people don't know anything about Brooklyn. I'm like, well, it's 70 neighborhoods, over 100 ethnic groups, and Brooklyn is a Dutch word, means broken land, and there were indigenous people there. That's why Canarsie was Canarsie Indians. Y'all feel I'm going with this? Like, I can't live somewhere and I don't know the history of that place. And so I also believe, like when you were talking about thinking about the gentleman, my wife and I, Jenna Parker and I, met at a yoga class, a hot yoga class 3.5 years ago, and a white brother goes in and shoots people in a yoga studio in Tallahassee, and they find out after the fact they have been posting sexist, anti-Semitic, homophobic, and anti-immigrant stuff on social media. So nowhere safe, you know? And then some people think the solution is, well, let's have guns everywhere. There are 300 million people in the country, and there's 300 million guns in the country. And, you know, Eve, when I was younger intellectually, I used to say, I can't get with Dr. King and this love stuff, or James Baldwin and his love stuff, but I'm like, violence is the solution? There's an article in the Daily News today where people are suggesting, well, why don't we have guns at the synagogues, have guns at the churches? I mean, this just becomes the Wild Wild West. We're just going to shoot each other. It makes no sense. And so when Eve talks about what do we want to see, well, what's wrong with love and peace and nonviolence? What's wrong with seeing ourselves?
And Christine is Schuler, the screamer, and three of us with the women of Congo, and I have a dear sister, Chushu, who's here tonight, who I haven't seen. And I just want to say, you know, one of the things it's taught me, you know, Bukavu is a small city that used to be 50,000 people that now has 1 million people because everybody's fled there from the war. And you can imagine the poverty, you can imagine the brokenness, you can imagine the fragmentation, you know, with a place that had 50,000 that now has 1 million. And there's no food, there's no jobs, there's no streets, except that now there is an Essence Road. I mean, it just got built. And, you know, we made this decision based on the needs of women who have been seriously raped and tortured during the 14-year war that's been fought there for minerals, right? It's an economic war. Congo has the greatest resources in Africa, and it has coltan. And coltan goes into our cell phones and our PlayStations and our computers. And so all these multinationals send in their proxy militias, and the proxy militias go into the villages and they rape children, they have husbands rape their daughters, they have sons rape their mothers, they destroy the family flees and they take over the mines. And those are the tactics they do. So, you know, in the last 15 years, we think close to 8 million people have died in the Congo, 8 million people, 8 million. And hundreds and hundreds of thousands of women have been tortured and raped. And it's still just with Dr. Mukwege's elevation, maybe now, there'll be a little bit of interest, but I'm not even convinced of that. But in the middle of Bukavu, we decided we were going to build a city of joy. That's what we were going to call it. And it was an absurdist, Beckett-like idea, right? You know, why would you build a city of joy in the middle of hell? And the answer is exactly that.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And this is what I've learned. It's such a deep lesson. I was just there 3 weeks ago, and I have to say it's the holiest place I have ever been. It's truly holy, because what's happened there is that because there is so much love, I mean, there are the mamas who built City of Joy, who now cook and take care of the women at night. There are the social workers who take care of the women during the day. There are the women who were once at City of Joy who have come back and now are now guarding the women and protecting the women. There is so much love there that when you walk in, you can literally feel like a wave of love hit you, and you just start dancing. You have no choice. You just start moving your body, because when love is really present, it is so powerful, it just takes you to another dimension. And what's happened, because of that reality, because there is so much love and so much healing and so much turning of pain to power and turning of pain to love, that it's begun to start to seep out and spread out into the surrounding community. And I'll just tell you this story. Around City of Joy, there was this camp. Chuchu, you'll remember this camp. It's like a mud tent city of the wives of soldiers who were just abandoned by the government and left there to die, essentially, with no money, no support, in the mud. And we would have to drive through that camp every day to get to City of Joy. And Mama C and I would look at each other and we'd just be like, one day, when we get this place built, we have to go back and figure out how we're going to bring this community in. Because we can't have a city here and have people outside feeling what they're feeling. And so over the last 8 years, we have found ways to begin to connect and reach out and serve and support and hire and be with those women in that camp. And when I was there last time, I realized that they've all changed. They all have joy now. They all have grace now. They all have spirit now. They all have hope now, because that energy is beginning to radiate out and it's becoming possible. And I think it's such a metaphor to me of, like, if you hold the love in one place big, if you hold the healing, if you hold, even where it seems totally impossible, if you stand for that love, if you stand in that love, 8 years, and I'm knocking wood, no one has ever come to City of Joy to hurt anybody. Because the love is so powerful. It's like that scene in the Tina Turner movie, which is my favorite scene. I watch it over and over. I don't know if you remember the scene, but at the end of the movie, when she's about to do the What's Love Got to Do with the concert, and she's sitting in her dressing room getting ready, and Ike walks in with a gun, and she just sits there, and she looks at him and she goes, Ike, I know who I am. I know who my spirit is. I know what I'm about to do. You have to do what you have to do. But she does it in a way where she's so completely connected up to the love and her own power in the love that he's like, I'm out of here. He doesn't have a choice, because when love is that powerful, you can't do anything but back out of the room. So I feel like that's what we all have to be working on in ourselves. Like, how do we increase that love in the face of ridiculous odds?
No, it doesn't exist. You know, it doesn't exist at all. I mean, Jen and I were at a program with Michael Bennett, the football player. I did a podcast with him back in June, and I was blown away that this man, this football player, all 6'5", 300 pounds of him, cried in public. He talked about his profound love for his wife as his equal, am I right, as his partner. He talked about his daughters having to deal with sexism their entire lives. And I said, wait a minute, this is a football player in America, an American football player. And I asked, I said, well, how did you come to this? And he talked about the strength of his mother and the impact that had on him. But that's an example, but we need more examples. And I think that, you know, James Powell said it best. If we don't deal with this, we will forever be in this kind of male prison, saying the same stuff and doing the same stuff over and over again.
But what is gonna, okay, so this is, you know, we're working in this coalition of groups right now, trying to figure out what could we really do to really game up the whole story around men and to get men to participate. And I think we've come up with a really good idea, but what's the catalyst? What is gonna get so that men go, Oh, I get this.
This is what I do. I do workshops with men all around the country, prisons, colleges, it doesn't matter, like in the community. Simple questions. What is a man? You know the answers are. Responsible, accountable, take care of the family, yada, yada, yada. Once folks get it, and everywhere I go, it doesn't matter the race of the men, the age of the men, generation, we all say the same thing. And I say this, I have the same response after they say all that. You just described my mother, now can you tell me what a man is? Seriously. Then the second question I always ask, name for me 5 women in history, American history. Not name Hillary Clinton or Michelle Obama or Rosa Parks, who have contributed to American history. It's usually silence. If I say 10 women, if I say 20 women, double silence. And then the defensiveness comes in with some, well, why do we need to know that? I said, well, can you name me 20 men? Quick. You feel what I'm saying? And so I feel like we gotta challenge people on how they were educated. And this is no different than how we challenge white sisters and brothers around white supremacy, around racism. You've been socialized to only think in terms of whiteness your entire lives, unless you're a progressive, out-of-the-box thinker, like Ensler, you know what I'm saying? And for men, we've been socialized only to see the world through the lens of us, and a very toxic definition of manhood. And so it's destructive. It's the reason why we're violent. It's the reason why, we act the way we do toward each other, the way we act the way we do toward women. And I just feel like we've got to question directly, well, what is a man?
But I think it's also about privilege.
Yeah.
And I just want to go, because I think the parallel to white people looking at their whiteness and privilege is parallel to that. Because I think a lot of what Trump is feeding on is making people afraid that the new world that's emerging in America is going to take something away from them, right?
Yeah.
And I think this idea that anybody takes anything away from us,
that's dangerous.
It's just ludicrous, first of all.
Yeah.
Like, people's liberation is always the multiplication of liberation. That's just a fact. That's just a fact. Like, as people get more and more liberated from their oppression, from their trauma, from their histories, we all get liberated. Because everybody is carrying a historical trauma. Whether it's the trauma your people perpetrated or the trauma your people suffered, we're all carrying that trauma.
That's right.
So part of what we all have to be looking at is like how we change that narrative that something's getting taken away from you. This is a perfect example. What do we have to offer? We have to offer the multiplication of liberation.
Right.
The fact that when everybody gets free, we all get freer. That's another story we have to tell. And we're not telling that story because we're in fear. We're not telling that story. Like, I can tell you, like, every time I can feel inside myself the bondage of racism, because we're all born into racist thinking, every single one of us.
And I feel the bondage of sexism.
And so I know for all of us, it's like you peel that layer back and you go, oh wow, look what else you're thinking that you didn't realize you were thinking. Or look at how you're behaving that you didn't realize. Or look at assumptions you're making based on what? Based on who? Who told you that story? Are you always questioning the story that you were born into? And I think part of that is like the real work that never got done after the 60s. Like, there was this moment when civil rights began to happen, then all of the leaders got shot, and then it all stopped. And rather than going under it, so that people really began to work on, how am I sexist? How am I racist? And not with gotcha, not with, oh my God, but how are we going to deconstruct this so that people can own it and change it, rather than saying, oh no, I'm not that, because they feel defensive and they feel like they're bad.
If I could bring this to, you made a great point, because Jenna and I talked about this. Me Too movement is tremendously important. We know the term was created by a black woman, Ronald Burke, in 2005, 2006, and it was exploded in the last year. And one of the things that Jenna has raised is, okay, we say this to the men, but where do we want them to go?
Exactly.
And if I can take it back to the early 90s, when I was operating in very disruptive spaces as a man, there were women who said to me, you gotta read. Well, number one, you gotta own your issues. You gotta own your issues. You need to really think about how you define manhood, and you gotta read. And this is when I was introduced to folks like Eve, like Bell Hooks, and folks like that. And it was with love, because those women could really easily say, to hell with him, but there was love there. And I know that's hard, because, what you just said was so profound. Like, when you talk about as a white sister, the racism, well, the men, as men, if you're a woke man, if you're truly woke, you are a sexist. We all are sexist. It's all around us. We benefit, we have gender privilege. There's no denying that. You know what I mean? But I didn't see it as giving up something. I saw it as, this is going to make me a better human being. I don't know anything about half the world's population. And I was raised by my mother, my aunts were there, my grandmother, there was all matriarchy around me. But how do I not know anything about women? You know, other than caretaker or sexual object or punching bag. And so, it was liberating. And it continues to be liberating. You know, as I learned from my wife, as I learned from you. And I think this, the message to men out there of all backgrounds is like, you know, stop thinking about this in terms of power and privilege. Think about this in terms of your empowerment and the empowerment of the entire planet. That's what it really should be about, you know. And I just feel like, you know, for me, it also included therapy, you know, to unpack traumas as you talked about. It includes, you know, having difficult conversations with women and learning how to listen, even when you don't want to listen. And it includes having conversations with men who are willing to go there and have those spaces. This is why we connect, NYC does with those men's circles every month is so important, Sister Sally. Because men, we got to talk to each other. Most men, most heterosexual men, so-called straight men, so cisgender men, we only talk about sex, women. We talk about sports, and we talk about money. That's what we talk about. One reason why Michael Cohen is one of my best friends, we can talk about anything. You know what I'm saying? The males that I have in my life, which has been a conscious decision over the last several years, they've got to be men who are well-rounded. You know what I mean? Who are not operating with these same typical definitions of masculinity, and everything is not a knee-jerk reaction to women. Because the worst thing we can do too, like what I've heard a lot the last year, Sister Eve, is like a lot of men saying, well, these women, da-da-da, and how dare they say this stuff about us, and not all men. Well, the reality is, gentlemen, is like, even if you're not the kind of man who would ever curse a woman out, do anything destructive to her, rape her, murder her, shoot her up in a yoga studio, all the stuff that we hear going on, but you have men around you, in your space, in your family, in your synagogue, church, masjid, fraternity, sports team, anywhere, and you don't say anything about it, then we're just as guilty. It's real simple. We're just as guilty. We are just as guilty. Because we're saying it's okay, this male privilege, this patriarchy, this sexism, because we get the benefit from it. You know, something that Eve said a couple years ago, that Jenna quotes in her show, She, is that imagine if men took ending sexism as seriously as watching the Super Bowl every year. I mean, it's one of the most profound things I've ever heard. Because I was one of those men up until the last couple of years when I realized this sport called football, I can no longer support the sport because of Colin Kaepernick, number one. Because of I mean, it's just a gladiator, foolish sport. I'm just gonna say that. And I'm a massive sports fan. But I'm like, this sport actually reinforces everything that's toxic about manhood, which is why a number of the football players engage in battering women. You know, and every Super Bowl week, you see this major thing going called sex trafficking with young girls happening wherever the Super Bowl is. How can you support that as a man if you're really serious about ending sexism? I can't.
But I also think what's connected to that, I'm working on a project now that's really, really tricky and really painful. It's really getting under a perpetrator. And I've really been feeling and just feeling into what makes men do what they do, in particular my father. And I'm really beginning to discover stuff that's kind of blowing my mind. Like the prison of patriarchy, this story about who you're allowed to be and versus who your authentic self is, and how you get encased in this persona. And so then this other shadow self begins to get repressed and pushed down because it isn't allowed to be in the world. And then eventually that shadow self surfaces and does all kinds of shit that is really painful and violent. And I think part of what I'm really beginning to understand is that the next stage of our movement has to be getting men to know, and men really believing that where we're going isn't going to take stuff away from them. It's going to give them back who they truly are without the pressure to be these patriarchal versions of themselves that really don't have anything to do. You know, I remember years ago I was doing this workshop with kids around the vagina monologues, and there were all these guys in this workshop, and I was asking them to talk about like what the vagina monologues brought up in them and what it provoked in them. And this guy just raised his hand and he just said to me, you know, I remember the day my father told me I could no longer cry. And that was the day I separated from my heart. Like I literally separated from my heart and I stopped having empathy. Because if I was not going to be able to cry, I couldn't live in my heart and I couldn't have empathy. So I had to just disconnect, literally unplug myself from myself.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about how many men, how just about every single man who has been brought up in patriarchy, and that is just the entire world as far as I can tell, has been unplugged from their central self. Yeah. In the same way that women have been. Look, we're forced out of our bodies because of the threat of violence. We're forced out of our beings, our bodies, our vaginas, our hearts, our spirits, because they're under siege and under threat, so we just live up here. Men are forced out of their hearts, right? And so here we have disconnected person meeting disconnected person. It's not going well. It's really not going well. And I think part of what we have to be creating time for, because nothing in this culture has time. Right. Everything's so fast. Everything's so, do it now. Instant Twitter, one word. Consciousness shifting takes energy, commitment, process, time. Yeah. And if we don't give that, it doesn't happen. No. And I just know for me, like, I have amazing sisters, African sisters and African American sisters I've been in this struggle with for years. I think about Kimberly Crenshaw, I think of Farah Tanis, I think of Dara Baldwin, I think of those women have taught me, they've called me, they've said, why are you doing that? Or why are you thinking that? I'm engaged in that process of liberation. Right. That's what my life is committed to. And that's what men have to say, okay, I'm going to commit to the process of liberation, whatever it takes.